Hello students, welcome to our Unit 2 Medieval Europe Vocabulary PowerPoint. As you can see at the bottom here, it's part 1. That's right, our Medieval Europe unit is so awesome. We have so many new vocabulary words that we're going to have to make this a two-parter. So we are going to do part 1 for homework this week, and then we'll do part 2 next week for homework. With this PowerPoint, you need to make sure that you do what you did the last time. Make sure that you have your vocabulary section of your notebook out. You're going to write down each word and write the definition completely. Make sure that as you go through this video that you pause it so that you have plenty of time to write down the definition. And once again, if you are confused by any words, please talk to me. I'm always here to help you. All right, so let's get started. Our first word, apprentice. It's an unpaid worker who is being trained in a craft. This could be a bunch of different kind of crafts. On the bottom here, I have a baker showing his apprentice how to make bread. If you remember from the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, Orlando Bloom, who played Will Turner, was actually an apprentice with a sword maker. And finally, today, we have Donald Trump, who runs his show, The Apprentice, where a bunch of people will go on the show and try to learn his business expertise. So in medieval times, we didn't usually have people learning about business expertise necessarily like Donald Trump, but they did learn some kind of business, such as the baker. Next, we have chivalry, which are the noble qualities of a knight. I'm sure you've heard of chivalrous acts before. Generally, it was thought of chivalrous acts towards women. They would respect women and make sure they would help take care of them. Today, we still use the term chivalry to describe when maybe a man and a woman go out on a date and the man will hold the door for the woman. That's considered very chivalrous. Next, we have clergy. These were people who served the church. We learned about the Pope last unit, so that he could be considered part of the clergy. We also have the monks. The monks were very important. We learned a little bit about them with the Vikings and how the poor monks were kind of abused by the Vikings, taken advantage of for their kindness, but they are very important in this unit. We're going to learn a lot more about them. The Crusades. These were military expeditions to win control of the Holy Land from the Turks. We won't really learn about this until the end of the unit, but if you've ever seen pictures of knights with white shields with red crosses, those were Crusades knights. So we are going to learn more about them later on. It played a very important part in medieval history, and we'll get to that later on. Excommunicate. It's to prevent someone from participating in church life. You guys should be experts on this. We learned about it in the last unit, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but don't forget too that besides church life, they also, if they excommunicate you, you can't go to heaven. So keep that in mind. Next, we have feudalism. Feudalism is a system of power in Europe in which the kings and queens had the most power, followed by the nobles, knights, serfs, and peasants. You should see this pyramid here. We are going to see it a lot this unit. It's very important. At the top, we have our king and queen. They have the most power. Next, we would have our lords and ladies. They would have the second most power during medieval times. Under them, we have the knights, who we will learn a lot about this year. And then at the bottom, we have our peasants and our serfs. Peasants and serfs actually are a little bit different. We'll talk about those details later on. Guild is an association made up of all the people in a town who have a certain trade. You should be familiar with this term since you already are all split into guilds. But basically with medieval times, people that did the same thing would all work together. So for example, all the horseshoe makers might come together and form a guild. And advantages to doing this would be that they would kind of come up with a set price so that nobody would make more money than the other person because they have different prices. It kind of was advantageous to join a guild because then everyone could be wealthy together. Next is the Magna Carta. This was the agreement between King John of England and his nobles that limited his power. This is one of the most important documents in history. It was one of the first times where the common people took power away from the king and gave more power to the common man. This is huge, and it actually helped the United States make their constitution. So, very important document. We're going to talk about it a lot this unit. Manor. It's a large estate that is owned by a lord. As you can see here, there's usually a giant house like this one here. And it wouldn't just be a giant house. You would also have almost like a town. You would have farmland, you would usually have a church, and there'd be a lot of peasants and serfs to work your land for you. So we are going to talk a lot about what a medieval manor would look like and what kind of people were involved with it. If you've ever seen any shows involving lords and ladies, you should be familiar with what a manor looks like, especially if you've ever seen Downton Abbey. That's a big manor. So we'll talk more about that later on. Medieval, this is our last word for part one. It just simply means from the Middle Ages. So the picture below here is a medieval castle. It just means that it was a castle that was built in the Middle Ages. So anytime you hear the term medieval, that's how you know where it is. We will talk about what years technically the Middle Ages are in our vocabulary PowerPoint part 2. So, just a reminder, make sure that you have copied down all the definitions. I will be checking them on Friday. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm always here for you, so just let me know. I hope you enjoyed Vocabulary PowerPoint Part 1, and I will see you for Part 2.